Sometimes the most profound moments in life come from the smallest voices. In the quiet sanctuary of a royal nursery, where fairy tales are read and dreams take flight, a 7-year-old princess would ask a question so simple yet so powerful that it would leave her father, a future king, speechless. This wasn't about crowns or castles, protocol or privilege. This was about something far more precious and fragile. The innocent curiosity of a child trying to understand a world that doesn't always make sense, even when you're born into royalty.
What happened that evening would ripple through the corridors of Kensington Palace, challenge everything Prince William thought he knew about protecting his children, and ultimately revealed that sometimes the most important conversations happen when the world grows quiet and a little girl simply wants to understand why things are the way they are. The golden September evening cast long shadows through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Prince William made his way down the familiar corridor toward the children's quarters.
His footsteps echoed softly against the polished floors, a sound that had become as routine as breathing over the past 7 years since Charlotte's birth. The palace, with all its grandeur and history, transformed into something entirely different during these precious bedtime hours. It became simply home. William loosened his tie as he walked, the formal events of the day finally behind him. He had spent the morning at a veterans' charity event, followed by an afternoon meeting with environmental conservation groups and an early evening reception for Commonwealth representatives. The weight of royal duty sat heavily on his shoulders, but as he approached Charlotte's room, that familiar warmth began to spread through his chest. These moments with his children weren't just breaks from his responsibilities. They were reminders of why those responsibilities mattered in the first place. The soft glow of nightlights guided him through the hallway decorated with family photographs and children's artwork. Charlotte's latest creation, a watercolor painting of what appeared to be the family dog Orla chasing butterflies in the Sandringham Gardens, hung proudly beside more traditional royal portraits. Catherine had insisted on displaying the children's art throughout their private quarters, believing their home should reflect their lives as a family first, royals second. As William reached Charlotte's door, he could hear the gentle murmur of Catherine's voice reading from what sounded like one of Roald Dahl's books. Charlotte had recently developed a passion for Matilda, declaring that she too wanted to have special powers and help people who couldn't help themselves. The irony wasn't lost on William that his daughter was drawn to stories about extraordinary children who fought against unfairness. Perhaps royal blood did carry certain instincts even when masked as childhood fantasy. He paused at the doorway, taking in the scene that never failed to calm his soul. Catherine sat on the edge of Charlotte's bed, her auburn hair falling in gentle waves as she leaned over the book. Charlotte, propped up against a mountain of pillows, clutched her favorite stuffed elephant, a gift from her great-grandmother that had traveled with the family to every official residence. The room itself was a perfect blend of royal tradition and childhood wonder. Antique furniture inherited from generations of royal children stood alongside modern toy chests and a reading corner filled with beanbags and fairy lights. And Matilda realized that sometimes grown-ups need children to remind them what's really important. Catherine read, her voice carrying that special inflection she reserved for storytelling. Charlotte's eyes were wide with attention, occasionally glancing toward the window where the last traces of daylight were fading into twilight. William cleared his throat gently, announcing his presence. Both his wife and daughter looked up with bright smiles that made every challenging moment of his day worthwhile. "Sorry I'm late," he said, stepping into the room and settling into the comfortable armchair that had become his designated spot for bedtime stories. "How are my two favorite girls?" "Papa!" Charlotte exclaimed, though she kept her voice at the appropriate bedtime volume. At 7, she had already mastered the art of expressing excitement while maintaining royal decorum, a skill that impressed and slightly saddened William in equal measure. Sometimes he wished she could just be loud and carefree, without worrying about proper behavior. "We're just finishing the chapter where Matilda helps Miss Honey get her house back," Catherine explained, marking their place in the book with Charlotte's favorite bookmark, a pressed flower from the gardens at Balmoral. "Someone has been asking very thoughtful questions about why some people are mean to others when they could choose to be kind instead." William studied his daughter's face, noting the serious expression that seemed far too mature for her years. Charlotte had always been observant, picking up on nuances that many adults missed. It was both a gift and a burden that came with being born into a family where every word and action was scrutinized by the world. "Those are very important questions," William said, moving to sit on the other side of Charlotte's bed.
"What do you think the answers might be?" Charlotte considered this carefully, a habit she had developed early in life. William and Catherine had always encouraged their children to think before speaking, but sometimes William worried they were asking too much of their young minds.
"I think some people are mean because they're scared," she said finally.
Like in the story, Miss Trunchbull is mean because she's scared that if she's nice, people won't listen to her. The insight struck William with unexpected force. Here was his 7-year-old daughter articulating complex human psychology with a clarity that escaped many adults. He exchanged a meaningful glance with Catherine, who wore an expression of pride mixed with concern. They both recognized that Charlotte's emotional intelligence was remarkable, but they also knew it meant she was processing aspects of the world that most children her age remained blissfully unaware of. "That's a very wise observation, sweetheart," Catherine said, smoothing Charlotte's hair.
It's not always easy to understand why people act the way they do, but trying to understand them is usually the first step toward helping them be better. Charlotte nodded thoughtfully, then looked directly at her father with those piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul.
"Papa, can I ask you something that's been wondering me?"
The phrase "wondering me" was one of Charlotte's linguistic quirks that William and Catherine had decided not to correct. Her vocabulary was remarkably advanced. But occasionally she would create her own expressions that somehow captured emotions more accurately than proper grammar ever could. "Wondering me" perfectly described the way important questions seem to live inside a person, growing and developing until they simply had to be asked. "Of course you can, darling. You can ask me anything," William replied, though he felt a familiar flutter of anxiety in his stomach. Charlotte's questions were never simple, and they often touched on subjects that required careful navigation between honesty and age-appropriate explanations. Charlotte took a deep breath, the way she always did before asking something important. "Why do some people say mean things about our family in the newspapers? And why do we have to be careful about everything we do when other families don't?" The question hung in the air, like a delicate soap bubble, beautiful, fragile, and impossible to ignore. William felt his chest tighten as he processed the complexity of what his daughter was asking.
This wasn't just curiosity about media attention or royal protocol. This was a child trying to understand why her life was fundamentally different from her friends, why privacy was a luxury she would never fully enjoy, and why people felt entitled to judge and criticize her family without knowing them personally.
Catherine's hand found William's, offering silent support as they both recognized this as one of those pivotal parenting moments that would shape how their daughter understood her place in the world. The weight of his response felt enormous, too light, and he would dismiss concerns that were clearly weighing on Charlotte's mind. Too heavy, and he risked burdening her with adult anxieties she wasn't equipped to handle. "That's a really big question, Charlotte," William said slowly, buying himself time to find the right words. "And it deserves a really good answer. Can you tell me what made you start thinking about this?" Charlotte fidgeted with her elephant's ears, a sign that she was processing something difficult. "Yesterday at school, Emma's mummy was talking to another mummy, and they were saying things about mummy being too thin, and about how Uncle Harry doesn't visit us anymore."
Emma asked me if it was true, and I didn't know what to say because I'm not supposed to talk about family things with friends, but I also don't like when people say things that might not be true.
William's heart clenched as he realized his 7-year-old daughter was already grappling with the impossible position that came with royal life, the constant tension between public scrutiny and private truth, between loyalty to family and the desire for normal friendships.
She was learning, far too early, that her life would always be subject to public interpretation, and that people would form opinions about her family based on incomplete information and sensationalized stories. "I'm sorry that happened to you, sweetheart," Catherine said gently. "It must have felt very confusing and maybe a little upsetting." "It did," Charlotte admitted quietly. "I wanted to tell Emma that Mummy eats plenty of good food, and that Uncle Harry still loves us even though grown-ups sometimes have complicated feelings. But I remembered that you said we should keep family matters private, so I just said I didn't want to talk about it." But then Emma looked sad, like maybe she thought I was being mean. The sophistication of Charlotte's analysis astounded William. She had instinctively understood multiple layers of the situation: the inaccuracy of the gossip, the complexity of family relationships, the importance of privacy, and the social dynamics of her friendship. She had navigated it all with remarkable wisdom, but the cost was clear in her troubled expression. "You handled that beautifully," William told her, meaning every word. "You were kind to your friend while also respecting our family's privacy. That's not easy to do, even for grown-ups. But it feels hard sometimes." Charlotte continued, her voice smaller now, "Like we have to be perfect all the time, and if we're not, everyone will know about it." Sarah's family went on holiday to Spain, and no one wrote stories about what they wore or whether they looked happy enough. But when we go on holiday, there are always pictures and people talking about whether we're doing the right things. William felt something crack inside his chest as he listened to his daughter articulate the central challenge of royal life with heartbreaking clarity. She was describing the goldfish bowl existence that had defined his entire life. The constant awareness that every moment, every expression, every choice was potentially public property. He had hoped to shield his children from this understanding for a few more years, but Charlotte's keen intelligence and the reality of modern media had made that impossible. "You're right that our life is different from other families," he said carefully. "And sometimes that does mean we have to think about things that other people don't have to think about. But that doesn't mean we have to be perfect. It just means we try our best to be kind and honest and helpful, just like any good person would." "But what if we make mistakes?" Charlotte asked, and William could hear the real fear behind the question. "What if I do something wrong and it ends up in the newspapers and makes people think bad things about our whole family?" The vulnerability in his daughter's voice nearly brought tears to William's eyes. Here was a 7-year-old child, already carrying the weight of public representation, already understanding that her individual actions could reflect on the entire institution of the monarchy. It was a burden that had shaped his own childhood in ways he was still unpacking, and seeing his daughter grapple with it felt like watching history repeat itself in the most painful way. "Oh, sweetheart," Catherine said, pulling Charlotte closer. "Everyone makes mistakes. That's how we learn and grow. And anyone who truly understands what it means to be a good person knows that mistakes don't define us, how we respond to them does." "But normal kids' mistakes don't end up on the front page of newspapers," Charlotte pointed out with devastating logic. "When Tommy at school accidentally broke the classroom fish tank, his mummy just had to replace it. If I broke something at school, it would probably be a story about how royal children are destructive, or how you and Papa aren't teaching me proper values." William exchanged another glance with Catherine, both of them recognizing the impossible position their daughter was describing. The media's hunger for royal stories meant that even innocent childhood mishaps could be blown out of proportion, analyzed for deeper meaning, and used to construct narratives about their family's character or parenting abilities. "You're very smart to notice that difference," William said finally. "And you're right that it's not entirely fair. But you know what I've learned? The people whose opinions really matter, the people who love us and know us as real people, they understand the difference between a mistake and who someone really is. And the people who don't know us well enough to understand that difference, well, their opinions don't actually change who we are or how much we're loved." Charlotte pondered this for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. "So it's like in the Matilda story? The people who judge Miss Honey without knowing her story are wrong, but that doesn't make Miss Honey any less wonderful?" "Exactly like that," Catherine confirmed, smiling at her daughter's ability to connect literature to life. "People might write stories about us that aren't complete or accurate, but that doesn't change the truth of who we are or how much we love each other. But it still feels scary sometimes," Charlotte admitted. "Like I have to be careful about everything I say and do, not because I want to be sneaky, but because I don't want to accidentally cause problems for everyone else." The matter-of-fact way she expressed this concern broke William's heart. His 7-year-old daughter was already self-censoring, already carrying responsibility for the family's public image in a way that no child should have. It was a dynamic he remembered all too well from his own childhood. The gradual understanding that his personal choices had public consequences that extended far beyond himself. William reached for Charlotte's small hand, marveling at how delicate it felt in his own. These were hands that would one day shake those of world leaders, sign important documents, and wave to crowds from palace balconies. But for now, they were simply the hands of his little girl, soft and trusting and still capable of being comforted by her father's touch. "Charlotte, I want you to listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice carrying the weight of every lesson he had learned through decades of public life. "Being careful and thoughtful about our actions is important, but it should never make you feel like you can't be yourself. The world needs to see who you really are. Your kindness, your curiosity, your wonderful sense of humor. If we hide all of that because we're worried about what people might say, then we're not really serving the people we're meant to help." "But how do I know the difference?" Charlotte asked, and William could see the genuine confusion in her eyes. "How do I know when it's okay to be myself and when I need to be more careful?" It was a question that had no simple answer, a navigation puzzle that William himself was still solving at 39 years old. The balance between authenticity and appropriate public behavior was something he negotiated daily,
often walking a tightrope between being genuine and being responsible to the institution he represented. "I think," Catherine said thoughtfully, "it's less about changing who you are, and more about choosing which parts of yourself to share in different situations. Like how you might be more silly and playful with George and Louis than you would be during a school assembly, but you're still completely yourself in both places." Charlotte nodded slowly, beginning to understand.
So it's not about being fake, it's about being appropriate? Exactly, William confirmed. And the most important thing is that the people who love you get to see all of you. Your silliness, your serious thoughts, your questions, your mistakes. Everything. The public might only see certain parts of who you are, but that doesn't make those parts less real or important. What about when people write things that are wrong? Charlotte pressed. Like when they said Mummy was sad all the time after Louis was born, but I saw her laughing every day and playing with us and singing in the garden? William felt a familiar surge of protectiveness mixed with frustration. Charlotte was referring to a particularly difficult period when the media had speculated endlessly about Catherine's mental health following their third child's birth.
The stories had been largely fabricated based on analyzed photographs and anonymous sources, but they had still caused real pain to his family. The fact that Charlotte had noticed and remembered these stories was both impressive and heartbreaking.
Those kinds of stories are very frustrating, Catherine admitted, her own voice tight with controlled emotion. Sometimes people write things about us without really knowing what our life is like behind closed doors. They might see a photograph where I look tired, which I definitely was with a new baby, and create a whole story about my feelings that isn't accurate. It's like when someone sees one piece of a jigsaw puzzle and tries to guess what the whole picture looks like. William added, searching for metaphors that would help his daughter understand the media's tendency toward speculation. They might be completely wrong about the full picture, but they tell everyone what they think it is anyway. That doesn't seem very fair to you, Charlotte said with a directness that never failed to amaze her parents. If I told stories about my friends without knowing if they were true, I would get in trouble for spreading rumors. The parallel she had drawn was uncomfortably accurate. The media operated by different rules than those taught in school playgrounds, but the fundamental principle of spreading unverified information remained the same.
William found himself struggling to explain why adults in the press were held to different standards than children in classrooms.
"You're absolutely right that it's not fair," he said finally.
And it's one of the hardest parts of our life. But here's what I've learned. We can't control what other people say about us, but we can control how we respond to it. It's about nothing else can do for them.
We can choose to focus on the people who know us and love us, and we can keep being kind and honest even when others aren't kind and honest about us.
Is that why you and Mummy always tell us to treat everyone with respect, even when they're not respectful to us?
Charlotte asked, making another connection that impressed William with its maturity.
That's exactly why, Catherine confirmed. Because how other people behave doesn't change who we choose to be. And in the long run, people remember kindness much more than they remember gossip or criticism. Charlotte sat quietly for several minutes, processing this conversation with the intense concentration she applied to everything important in her life. William watched her face, seeing glimpses of the thoughtful adult she would someday become while wanting desperately to preserve the innocent child she still was. "Papa," she said finally, "can I ask you something else that's been wondering me?" "Always," William replied, though he braced himself for whatever insight or concern she was about to share. "Do you ever wish we weren't royal? Like, do you ever wish we could just be a normal family where no one cared what we did or where we went?" The question hit William like a physical blow, not because it was unexpected, but because it was something he had wondered himself countless times throughout his life. In quiet moments, usually in the early hours of morning when the weight of duty felt particularly heavy, he had imagined what it would be like to live anonymously, to make choices based purely on personal preference rather than public impact. "I think everyone sometimes wishes their life was different in some ways," he said carefully. "There are definitely times when I wish we could go to the park or take a holiday without photographers following us. Or when I wish you could have playdates without security arrangements and protocol discussions." "But," Charlotte prompted, sensing there was more to his answer, "but I also know that our life gives us incredible opportunities to help people and make a real difference in the world. When we visit hospitals, we get to meet amazing doctors and brave patients. When we support charities, we can help raise money and awareness for important causes. And because people pay attention to what we do, we can use that attention to highlight things that really matter." "Like when you talk about protecting the environment," Charlotte said, referencing conversations she had overheard about William's conservation work. Exactly. And like when Mummy visits schools and talks about the importance of early childhood development. Because people listen to what we say, we can help make sure they know about problems that need solving and people who need help. Charlotte considered this, weighing the advantages against the disadvantages with the seriousness of a much older person. So it's like having a really loud voice that carries further than other people's voices? That's a perfect way to put it, William said, smiling at his daughter's ability to distill complex concepts into clear metaphors. And with that loud voice comes responsibility to use it wisely and kindly. But what if I don't want my voice to be so loud? Charlotte asked, and William could hear the real anxiety behind the question. What if I just want to help people in quiet ways, like Miss Honey helps children by being a good teacher? The question revealed a level of self-awareness that both impressed and concerned William. Charlotte was already thinking about her future role and responsibilities in ways that showed remarkable maturity. But she was also expressing reservations about the public nature of royal duty that resonated deeply with his own complicated feelings about his position. There are many ways to serve people, Catherine said gently. Some of them are very public and some of them are much quieter. The most important thing is that you use your gifts, whatever they are, to make the world a little bit better. And you have lots of time to figure out exactly how you want to do that, William added. Right now, your job is to be a curious, kind, learning 7-year-old. The helping the world part comes later, and you'll get to choose how you want to do it. Will I really get to choose? Charlotte asked with a directness that took William by surprise. Or are there things I'll have to do because I'm royal whether I want to or not? The question touched on one of the fundamental tensions of royal life, the balance between personal choice and institutional obligation. William knew that Charlotte would indeed face expectations and responsibilities that would limit her choices in ways that other children wouldn't experience. He also knew that how he answered this question would shape her understanding of her own agency and autonomy. There will be some things that are expected of you, he said honestly. Just like there are expectations for every person based on their family, their talents, and their opportunities. But within those expectations, you'll have many choices about how you want to live your life and serve others. What kinds of things will be expected? Charlotte pressed, clearly wanting to understand the scope of her future obligations. William and Catherine exchanged glances, both recognizing that this conversation was moving into territory they had hoped to navigate gradually over many years rather than all at once during a bedtime story. But Charlotte's questions were earnest and important, and deserved honest, age-appropriate answers. Well, Catherine said carefully, you'll probably be expected to attend certain important ceremonies and events, to support charities and causes that matter to you, and to represent our family and our country with kindness and dignity. Like how you and Papa go to different countries and meet with important people? Charlotte asked. Sometimes, yes. Though by the time you're old enough for those responsibilities, you'll have learned all about the places you might visit and the people you might meet. And you'll get to choose which causes and charities are most important to you. Just like Papa chose to focus on conservation, and Mummy chose to focus on early childhood development. Charlotte nodded thoughtfully. So I could choose to focus on helping animals, or teaching children, or making sure everyone has enough food? Absolutely, William confirmed. In fact, I hope you will choose causes that you feel passionate about. The work is much more meaningful when it comes from your heart. What if I wanted to be a teacher like Miss Honey, or a veterinarian, or a scientist? Could I still do those jobs and be royal too? The question revealed Charlotte's attempt to understand whether royal duty would preclude personal professional ambitions, a concern that spoke to her desire for autonomy and meaningful work beyond ceremonial obligations. Many members of royal families have had careers. Your great-aunt Princess Anne was an excellent equestrian who competed in the Olympics. And there are royals in other countries who are doctors, artists, and business people while still fulfilling their royal duties. So I don't have to choose between helping people as a royal and helping people in other ways? No, you don't, William assured her. In fact, having other experiences and expertise often makes someone better at their royal duties because they understand more about how the world really works.
Charlotte seemed relieved by this information, and William felt a wave of gratitude that they lived in an era when royal family members had more freedom to pursue personal interests than in previous generations.
He wanted his daughter to know that her life could include both service and personal fulfillment.
Papa, Charlotte said after another period of contemplative silence.
Yes, sweetheart. Do you think the people who write mean things about us in newspapers have children, And if they do, how would they feel if someone wrote mean things about their children? The question demonstrated such a sophisticated understanding of empathy and moral reasoning that William felt momentarily speechless.
His 7-year-old daughter had identified one of the core ethical issues with invasive media coverage: the failure to apply the same standards of privacy and respect to public figures that journalists would expect for their own families. "That's a very thoughtful question," Catherine said, clearly as moved by Charlotte's insight as William was. "I think many of them do have children, and I imagine they wouldn't like it if people wrote unkind things about their families." "Then why do they do it to us?" Charlotte asked with genuine confusion. "Sometimes people don't think about how their actions affect others," William explained, though he felt the inadequacy of his answer even as he spoke. "And sometimes they focus so much on their jobs, like trying to write interesting stories, that they forget that the people they're writing about have feelings too." "That seems like something grown-ups should be better at remembering," Charlotte observed. "It absolutely is," William agreed. "And you're right that grown-ups should know better. But unfortunately, not all grown-ups are as thoughtful about other people's feelings as you are." Charlotte looked pleased by this compliment, but also troubled by the broader implications. "If I become famous like you and Mummy, will people write things about my children someday too?" The question pierced William's heart because it revealed that Charlotte was already thinking about protecting future generations, her own children, from the same scrutiny she was beginning to understand would shape her own life. The cycle of public attention and media speculation that had affected his grandmother, his father, himself, and now his children was something Charlotte could already envision continuing. "I hope that by the time you have children, people will have learned to be more respectful of families' privacy," Catherine said diplomatically. "And I hope you'll have lots of tools and support to help protect your family just like we're learning to protect ours." "What kinds of tools?" Charlotte asked with the practical curiosity that characterized all her questions. "Well, good friends who understand what your life is like, wise advisors who can help you make good decisions, and strong relationships with family members who will always love you no matter what anyone else says," William explained. "And the knowledge that you're a good person doing important work, even if not everyone understands or appreciates it," Catherine added. Charlotte absorbed this information quietly, and William could see her filing it away with all the other complex realities she was gradually learning about her unusual life. He felt a profound sadness that she needed to think about these things at all, mixed with pride at how thoughtfully and maturely she was processing them. "I think," Charlotte said finally, "that I understand why some parts of being royal are hard. But I also think maybe the hard parts make the good parts more important."
Like, if everyone could raise money for hospitals just by showing up, then it wouldn't be as special when we do it. But because people pay attention to us, we can help in ways that other people can't.
Well said.
William stared at his daughter in amazement. At 7 years old, she had articulated something it had taken him decades to fully understand: that the burdens of public life were inextricably linked to its privileges, and that both carried moral weight that demanded careful consideration.
"That's exactly right, Charlotte," William said, his voice thick with emotion. "You understand something very important that many adults struggle to see clearly." Charlotte smiled at the praise, but her expression remained thoughtful. Outside her bedroom window, the last traces of daylight had given way to the soft glow of London's evening lights. The palace grounds were quiet except for the distant sound of traffic from Kensington High Street, a reminder that beyond these protected walls, the city continued its nightly rhythm. "Papa," Charlotte said, settling more comfortably against her pillows, "can I ask you about Uncle Harry?" William felt his chest tighten immediately. Harry's name had become a sensitive topic in their household, not because of anger or resentment, but because of the complexity of emotions surrounding his departure from royal life and the subsequent public tensions. William had hoped to shield the children from the family's internal struggles for a few more years, but Charlotte's earlier mention of playground conversations about Harry suggested that hope had been naive. "What about Uncle Harry, sweetheart?" Catherine asked gently, though William could see the concern in her eyes. "Some people at school say that Uncle Harry doesn't like us anymore because he moved to America and said mean things about the family. But that doesn't seem right to me because I remember him being nice and funny when I was little." "Did something bad happen between you and Uncle Harry?" The directness of her question was both refreshing and challenging. William appreciated that Charlotte felt comfortable asking difficult questions, but he also recognized the delicate balance required in answering honestly while maintaining appropriate boundaries about family privacy. "Uncle Harry will always be family, and he'll always love you and George and Louis. William said carefully. Sometimes grown-ups and families disagree about important things, and those disagreements can make relationships complicated for a while. Is it like when George and I fight about whose turn it is to choose the movie, but bigger and more serious? Charlotte asked, trying to understand adult conflict through the lens of her own experience with sibling disputes.
In some ways, yes, Catherine replied. But when you and George disagree, you usually work it out pretty quickly, because you live in the same house and see each other every day.
When grown-ups disagree and they live far apart, it can take much longer to work through the problems. Are you and Uncle Harry working through your problems? Charlotte asked with the hopeful innocence of a child who believed that all conflicts could eventually be resolved.
William paused, considering how to answer truthfully without burdening his daughter with adult complexities she wasn't equipped to understand. The truth was that he and Harry were not actively working through their problems, partly because of geographic distance, partly because of public pressures that made private conversation difficult, and partly because some wounds needed time to heal before productive dialogue could occur.
We're trying to figure out how to be good brothers to each other even when we disagree about some important things, he said finally. Sometimes that takes time and space and patience. Do you miss him? Charlotte asked, and William could see genuine sadness in her eyes.
Yes, I do, William admitted, because that truth was uncomplicated even if everything else about the situation was complex. I miss talking to him, and laughing with him, and having him around for family celebrations. Do you think he misses us too? I'm sure he does, Catherine said warmly.
He loved playing with all of you when you were babies, and I know he thinks about you often.
Charlotte processed this information with the same careful consideration she applied to all difficult topics. Maybe when I'm older, I could visit him in America and tell him about school and friends and what we've been doing. Sometimes when people are apart for a long time, they need someone to help them remember why they love each other. The suggestion was so innocent and hopeful that William felt tears prick at his eyes.
Charlotte's instinctive desire to heal family rifts, her belief that love could overcome conflict, and her willingness to take on the role of bridge builder revealed a generous spirit that humbled him. That's a beautiful idea, sweetheart, he said.
Family relationships are always worth protecting and healing when possible. Is that why you and Papa work so hard to make sure our family stays close? Charlotte asked, turning to Catherine. Like why we always eat dinner together when you're both home, and why we have family meetings to talk about problems instead of just being angry. Catherine nodded, smiling at her daughter's perceptiveness.
Exactly. We learn from our own families, both the good things and the difficult things, and we want to make sure you and George and Louis always know that you can talk to us about anything, and that we'll work together to solve problems.
Even if one of us makes a really big mistake, Charlotte pressed.
Especially then, William assured her. Some of the most important conversations happen after mistakes, because that's when people need love and support the most. Charlotte seemed satisfied with this answer, but William could see another question forming behind her thoughtful expression. She had a way of building up to her most important concerns, working through related topics until she felt ready to address what was really weighing on her mind.
Papa, what if I don't want to be a working royal when I grow up?
She asked suddenly.
What if I want to do something different, like Uncle Harry did? The question hung in the air, like a challenge to everything William had been raised to believe about duty, obligation, and service to the crown. He realized that Charlotte was grappling with the same fundamental question that had driven Harry's departure, whether royal duty was a choice or an obligation, and what happened when personal desire conflicted with institutional expectation.
You'll have choices about how you want to serve, William said carefully. The most important thing is that whatever you choose, you do it with thought and care for how it affects others.
But what if what I want to do would disappoint you or make the Queen sad or cause problems for the monarchy? Charlotte asked, demonstrating an understanding of competing loyalties that seemed far too sophisticated for her age. William felt a familiar weight settle in his chest, the same weight he had carried throughout his own youth when he questioned whether his personal desires could coexist with royal expectations. The difference was that he had been much older when these questions became pressing, and he had had time to develop coping mechanisms and philosophical frameworks for navigating them. Charlotte, I want you to listen to me very carefully, he said, taking both of her hands in his.
Your happiness and your sense of purpose matter more to me than any title or tradition or expectation. If you grow up and decide that you can best serve the world in a way that doesn't involve official royal duties, then we'll support that choice.
Really? Charlotte asked, her eyes wide with surprise. Really, Catherine confirmed. We want you to have a life that feels meaningful and authentic to you. Royal duties are one way to serve others, but they're not the only way. But wouldn't that make things difficult for the monarchy if royal children keep choosing to leave? Won't there be no one left to do the work? Charlotte's question revealed a surprisingly mature understanding of institutional sustainability, and the pressure on younger royals to maintain traditions established by previous generations.
She was already thinking about her role not just in terms of personal choice, but in terms of responsibility to the broader system. That's a thoughtful concern, William acknowledged.
But institutions survive by adapting to changing times and changing people, not by forcing people to fit into roles that don't suit them. A monarchy that depends on people sacrificing their personal happiness probably isn't worth preserving.
Do you think Uncle Harry made the right choice?
Charlotte asked. Clearly trying to understand whether departure represented failure or courage. William paused, recognizing this as one of those moments when his answer would shape how his daughter understood complex moral questions. The truth was that he had conflicted feelings about Harry's choices. He understood the motivations while questioning some of the execution, respected the desire for privacy while regretting the public nature of the departure. "I think Uncle Harry made the choice that felt right for him and his family at the time," William said finally.
Whether it was the right choice in some absolute sense is hard to say, because there were no perfect options. But I respect that he was trying to do what he thought was best for the people he loves most.
So sometimes there aren't clear right and wrong answers, just different choices with different consequences? Charlotte asked. Exactly. And the most important thing is that you make choices thoughtfully, with consideration for how they affect others, and with honesty about what you can and can't handle. Charlotte nodded, clearly filing this information away for future reference. William marveled at how naturally she processed nuanced concepts that many adults struggled with. The idea that moral decisions could be complex, that good people could make different choices, and that respect and understanding could coexist with disagreement.
"I hope Uncle Harry is happy in America," she said finally. "And I hope that even if our family is different now, we can still love each other from far away." The simplicity and generosity of her statement moved William profoundly. Here was his 7-year-old daughter, modeling the kind of unconditional love and emotional maturity that he and Harry had struggled to maintain through their own conflicts. She had somehow understood intuitively that family bonds could survive geographic distance and ideological differences. "I hope so too, sweetheart," he said softly. "And I think that hope is exactly the kind of thing that can help make it true." Charlotte smiled at this, then settled back against her pillows with a contented sigh.
But William could see that she wasn't finished with her questions. There was still something weighing on her mind that required attention. "Papa, there's one more thing that's been wondering me," she said, using that endearing phrase that never failed to make him smile. "What's that, darling? Do you think it's fair that I was born into this life when other children weren't? Like I get to live in beautiful places and meet interesting people and have opportunities that most kids don't have, but I didn't do anything special to earn it.
And other kids who might be smarter or kinder than me don't get the same chances just because of which family they were born into." The question struck William with its profound moral sophistication.
Charlotte was grappling with concepts of privilege, fairness, and justice that formed the foundation of political philosophy and social ethics. She was questioning the fundamental premise of hereditary systems, while simultaneously trying to understand her place within one.
That's one of the most important questions anyone can ask, Catherine said, clearly as impressed as William by their daughter's moral reasoning. And the fact that you're thinking about it shows that you understand something crucial about how the world works. But what's the answer? Charlotte pressed.
Is it fair? Honestly, no. It's probably not fair in the way that most people think about fairness. William said, deciding that such a thoughtful question deserved an equally thoughtful answer. "You're right that you didn't choose to be born royal, any more than other children chose to be born into different circumstances. Life isn't fair in that sense. Some people are born with advantages, and others face challenges that they didn't choose. So why doesn't everyone just work to make things more fair?" Charlotte asked with the logical directness of childhood. "Many people do work toward that goal," Catherine explained. "And that's actually one of the reasons why royal families exist in modern times, to use the advantages we've inherited to help level the playing field for others." "Is that why you visit schools in poor areas and Papa works on homelessness?" Charlotte asked, making connections between her parents' charitable work and larger questions of social justice. "Partly yes," William confirmed. "We can't change the fact that we were born into privilege, but we can choose to use that privilege responsibly to help others, and to highlight problems that need solving." "So the unfairness of my advantages becomes more fair if I use them to help people who don't have the same advantages?" Charlotte asked, working through the moral mathematics of privilege and responsibility. "That's a beautiful way to think about it," William said. "It doesn't completely solve the unfairness problem, but it means that the advantages can serve a purpose beyond just making our own lives comfortable." Charlotte considered this carefully. It's like if I got extra cookies by accident, the right thing would be to share them with kids who didn't get any, not to just eat them all myself. Exactly like that, Catherine agreed, smiling at her daughter's ability to distill complex ethical concepts into relatable examples. But what if sharing the cookies isn't enough? What if the real problem is that the cookie distribution system is unfair? Charlotte continued, pushing her metaphor to its logical conclusion. William stared at his daughter in astonishment. At 7 years old, she had identified the fundamental tension between charitable action and systemic change, between individual responsibility and structural reform. She was asking whether working within an unfair system to mitigate its effects was sufficient, or whether the system itself needed to be changed. That's an even deeper question, he admitted. And I think different people have different answers to it. Some people think the best approach is to work within existing systems to make them as fair and helpful as possible. Others think the systems themselves need to be completely changed. What do you think? Charlotte asked, clearly wanting her father's personal perspective rather than a diplomatic overview of different positions. William felt the weight of the question, knowing that his answer would shape how his daughter thought about her own role and responsibilities. He also knew that his position as future king complicated his ability to advocate for dramatic systemic change, but his role as father demanded honesty about his values and beliefs.
I think both approaches are important, he said finally.
I think we need people working within existing systems to make them better and more fair, and we also need people pushing for bigger changes when systems aren't working well enough. The key is that everyone should be working toward the same goal. A world where every child has the opportunity to reach their full potential, regardless of what family they're born into.
And you think the monarchy can be part of making that happen? Charlotte asked. I think it can be, if it continues to evolve and adapt to serve people's needs rather than just maintaining traditions for their own sake, William replied. But that requires each generation of royal family members to think carefully about how they can best serve, and to be willing to change things that aren't working. Charlotte nodded thoughtfully. So maybe my job isn't just to continue doing things the way they've always been done, but to figure out how to do them better. That's exactly your job, Catherine confirmed. To take the best parts of what previous generations built and improve on the parts that could be better.
That sounds like a really big responsibility, Charlotte observed.
It is, William acknowledged. But you don't have to carry it alone, and you don't have to figure it all out right now. You have lots of time to learn and grow and think about how you want to contribute to making the world better. Charlotte smiled, seeming satisfied with this framework for thinking about her future role. But then her expression grew serious again, and William braced himself for whatever final question was coming. Papa, she said quietly, what if I'm not good enough? What if I try my best to help people and make good choices, but I still make mistakes that hurt people or disappoint them? What if I'm not as smart, or as kind, or as brave as the people who came before me? The vulnerability in her voice broke William's heart. Here was his extraordinary 7-year-old daughter, who had just demonstrated wisdom and empathy beyond her years, worried that she might not be adequate to the responsibilities she was beginning to understand would be hers. William felt his throat constrict as he looked at his daughter's worried face. In that moment, Charlotte wasn't a future princess grappling with constitutional questions. She was simply a little girl afraid she might not be good enough, seeking reassurance from the father who loved her more than life itself. Oh, sweetheart, he said, pulling her into a gentle embrace. Can I tell you a secret that I wish someone had told me when I was your age? Charlotte nodded against his shoulder, and William could feel some of the tension leaving her small body as he held her close. The people who came before us, my grandmother, my father, all the kings and queens throughout history, they weren't perfect either. They made mistakes, they had doubts. They sometimes felt overwhelmed by their responsibilities. What made them good at their jobs wasn't that they never failed, but that they cared deeply about serving others, and they kept trying to do better, even when things went wrong. Really? Charlotte asked, pulling back to look at his face. Even the Queen made mistakes. Even the Queen, William confirmed with a gentle smile. She would be the first to tell you that she learned more from her mistakes than from her successes. And she would also tell you that the most important quality in a leader isn't perfection. It's the willingness to listen, to learn, and to put other people's needs before your own comfort.
Charlotte considered this information carefully.
So when I make mistakes, that doesn't mean I'm bad at being royal. It means I'm learning how to be better. Exactly, Catherine said, smoothing Charlotte's hair. And you know what?
Based on the questions you've asked tonight and the way you think about other people's feelings, I think you're already showing the most important qualities of a good leader.
What are those qualities? Charlotte asked, clearly seeking a framework for understanding her own strengths and areas for growth.
Well, you're curious about the world around you, William began, counting on his fingers.
You care about fairness and justice. You're willing to ask difficult questions even when the answers might be complicated. You show empathy for people who are different from you. And you're thoughtful about the difference between what you want and what might be best for others. Those all sound like things that would make someone a good person, not just a good royal, Charlotte observed. And that's the most important point of all, Catherine said. Being a good royal starts with being a good person. Everything else, the ceremonies, the speeches, the official duties, those are just ways of expressing your goodness in public. So I don't have to be perfect, I just have to keep trying to be good and kind and helpful? Charlotte asked, seeking confirmation of this more manageable standard. That's all any of us can do, William assured her, and you're already doing it beautifully. Charlotte smiled, and William could see relief flooding through her expression.
The weight of impossible expectations was lifting, replaced by a more sustainable understanding of what would be asked of her. Papa, she said after a moment, can I tell you what I think about all of this? I would love to hear what you think. I think being royal is like being given a really special tool that can help fix things that are broken in the world.
But just having the tool doesn't make you a good fixer. You have to learn how to use it properly, and you have to care enough about the broken things to want to fix them. William stared at his daughter in amazement.
She had just articulated a philosophy of royal service that was both more sophisticated and more accessible than most constitutional scholars managed. The idea of royal privilege as a tool for social good, contingent on both skill and moral commitment, represented exactly the kind of evolved thinking that would serve the monarchy well in the decades to come.
That's the wisest thing I've heard anyone say about royal duty, he told her honestly. And I think if you remember that idea as you grow up, you'll know how to make good choices about how to use your position.
Do you think other people will understand that idea too? Charlotte asked. Like the people who write in newspapers? Or the people who get angry about royal families having money and privileges?
Some will, and some won't,
Catherine replied honestly.
But I think if you focus on using your tool effectively to help people, most people will be able to see that you're sincere about serving others rather than just enjoying advantages. And the people who don't understand, or who decide to be critical no matter what you do.
Charlotte pressed, clearly still concerned about public scrutiny and criticism.
Those people exist for everyone who tries to do important work, William explained.
Even doctors who save lives have critics. Even teachers who dedicate their careers to helping children face complaints. Even charity workers who spend their time helping others sometimes get criticized. That's just part of trying to make a difference in the world.
So the criticism doesn't mean I'm doing something wrong? Charlotte asked. Not necessarily.
It might mean you need to listen and adjust your approach. Or it might just mean that some people are determined to find fault no matter what you do. The key is learning to tell the difference between criticism that can help you improve and criticism that you should ignore. Sciences are questions.
Charlotte nodded, clearly filing this guidance away for future reference. How do you tell the difference? Good criticism usually comes with specific suggestions for how to do better, Catherine explained. It focuses on actions rather than personal attacks, and it comes from people who seem to genuinely want to help you succeed. Criticism that's just meant to tear you down usually involves name-calling, exaggeration, or attacking things you can't control. Like when people criticize what I'm wearing versus when they criticize how I behave toward others. Charlotte asked, making a connection that impressed her parents. Exactly like that.
Criticism about your clothes or your appearance is usually not very helpful because it doesn't relate to whether you're doing your job well. But if someone pointed out that you seemed impatient with a child during a school visit, that might be worth thinking about, because patience is important when working with young people.
Charlotte absorbed this distinction thoughtfully. So I should pay attention to criticism about whether I'm being kind and helpful, but not worry too much about criticism of things that don't really matter for helping people. That's perfect, William confirmed. You're learning to separate the essential from the superficial, which is one of the most important skills anyone in public life can develop. Papa, Charlotte said, settling back against her pillows with a more relaxed expression than she had worn all evening. I think I understand better now why you and Mummy work so hard to teach us about kindness and thinking about other people's feelings. It's not just because those are nice things to do, it's because they're the most important parts of any job that involves serving others. You've got it exactly right, William said, feeling a profound sense of pride and relief. Charlotte had worked through her concerns and arrived at an understanding that was both realistic and hopeful, both grounded in moral principles and practical wisdom.
And I think, Charlotte continued, that maybe the reason Uncle Harry's situation is so sad isn't because he chose something wrong, but because it's hard when someone you love feels like they have to go far away to be happy. Like when my friend Emma's family moved to Scotland. Emma wasn't wrong to move, and I wasn't wrong to be sad about it, but it was still hard for everyone.
The comparison was both heartbreaking and illuminating. Charlotte had found a way to understand her uncle's departure that didn't require judgment or blame, but simply acknowledged the painful reality that sometimes love and distance coexist, that sometimes family members make choices that are right for them but difficult for others who care about them.
That's a very wise way to think about it, Catherine said, clearly moved by her daughter's insight. Sometimes the hardest parts of loving people is accepting that they need to make choices that take them away from us, even when we wish they would stay close. But that doesn't mean the love goes away, does it? Charlotte asked.
Even if Uncle Harry lives in America forever, he'll still be my uncle, and I'll still love him. Love doesn't disappear because of distance or disagreement, William assured her. It might change shape or express itself differently, but real love, family love, endures through all kinds of challenges. Charlotte smiled at this confirmation, then yawned widely.
The emotional intensity of their conversation was finally giving way to the physical tiredness that bedtime was meant to address. I think I'm ready to sleep now, she announced. I have a lot to think about, but good thoughts instead of worried thoughts. I'm so glad, Catherine said, leaning down to kiss Charlotte's forehead. Sweet dreams, my brave, thoughtful girl.
Mummy?
Charlotte said as Catherine straightened up. Yes, darling? Thank you for always answering my questions, even when they're big and complicated. It makes me feel safer to understand things, even when the things are sometimes hard.
Catherine's eyes filled with tears at this simple expression of gratitude. It's my privilege to answer your questions, sweetheart.
Never stop asking them. William tucked the covers around his daughter, marveling at how small she looked in her bed despite the enormity of the topics they had just navigated together.
Sleep well, Charlotte, and remember, you have years and years to grow into all of these responsibilities.
For now, just focus on being the wonderful 7-year-old you are.
I will, Papa.
But can I ask you one tiny last question? Of course. Do you think I'll be a good grown-up someday? The question was asked with the sleepy innocence of a child seeking bedtime reassurance, but it carried echoes of all the deeper concerns they had explored throughout the evening.
William looked at his daughter, this remarkable little person who had demonstrated such wisdom, empathy, and moral reasoning, and felt absolutely certain of his answer.
Charlotte, I think you're going to be an extraordinary grown-up, he said firmly. Not because you're royal, but because you have a kind heart, a curious mind, and the courage to ask important questions.
Those qualities will serve you well no matter what path you choose in life.
Thank you, Papa.
I love you. I love you, too, sweetheart. More than all the stars in the sky.
William and Catherine made their way quietly toward the door, pausing to turn off the main light and activate the soft night light that would keep Charlotte's room gently illuminated through the night. As they reached the threshold, Charlotte's voice stopped them one final time.
Papa, Mummy, they turned back to see her sitting up in bed, silhouetted against the warm glow of her nightlight.
Thank you for helping me understand that being royal doesn't mean being perfect.
It just means caring enough to keep trying to help people even when it's hard. That's exactly right, darling, William said softly.
And thank you for reminding us what's truly important about all of this. What did I remind you of? That serving others isn't about titles or ceremonies or traditions. It's about love. Love for people. Love for justice. Love for making the world a little bit better. And you, my sweet Charlotte, have more love in your heart than anyone I know. Charlotte beamed at this, then settled back into her pillows with a contented sigh. Good night, Papa.
Good night, Mummy. Good night, our precious girl. As William and Catherine stepped into the hallway and gently closed Charlotte's door, they stood for a moment in the quiet corridor, processing the remarkable conversation they had just shared with their daughter.
The evening had begun with a simple bedtime story and evolved into something much more profound, a dialogue about identity, purpose, privilege, responsibility, family, love, and the complex moral landscape that their children would need to navigate. She's going to be all right, isn't she? Catherine whispered, voicing the concern that lived in both their hearts. She's going to be more than all right, William replied, pulling his wife close. She's going to be extraordinary. Did you hear the way she thought through those questions? The empathy she showed? The connection she made? She has your sense of justice and your grandfather's wisdom, Catherine observed. But more than that, she has something uniquely her own. This ability to see complicated situations clearly and find the humanity in them.
I was terrified when she started asking those questions, William admitted. I thought we had years before we needed to address these topics.
But maybe it's better this way. Maybe it's better that she's processing these realities gradually, with our guidance rather than having them thrust upon her suddenly when she's older.
And maybe, Catherine said thoughtfully, the fact that she's asking these questions now shows that she's ready to begin understanding her place in the world.
Not the full weight of it, but the foundation that will help her carry that weight when the time comes. They walked slowly toward their own bedroom, both still absorbing the wisdom their 7-year-old daughter had shared. The conversation had revealed not just Charlotte's remarkable maturity but also her essential goodness, her instinct to think of others, her desire for fairness, her capacity for forgiveness and understanding. She's going to face challenges we can't even imagine yet, William said as they reached their own door. The world is changing so rapidly, the role of monarchy will continue to evolve, the pressures of public life will only intensify with social media and global connectivity. But she'll face them with the right foundation, Catherine replied confidently.
She understands that privilege comes with responsibility. She knows that love matters more than protocol.
And she's learned that asking difficult questions is the first step toward finding meaningful answers. William nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle over him for the first time in months. Charlotte's questions had initially alarmed him because they suggested she was growing aware of challenges he had hoped to shield her from longer. But her thoughtful responses to those challenges had revealed a strength and wisdom that suggested she would not just survive the complexities of royal life, but might actually transform them. As they prepared for bed, both William and Catherine found themselves reflecting on how the evening's conversation would shape their approach to parenting all 3 children going forward. Charlotte's readiness for complex discussions suggested that George and Louis might also benefit from more sophisticated conversations about their roles and responsibilities. We should talk with George soon, too, Catherine said, echoing William's thoughts. He's been quieter lately during family discussions, and I suspect he's been thinking about some of the same things Charlotte raised tonight. And Louis will probably surprise us with his own version of these questions before we expected, William agreed. He's been listening to everything, even when we think he's too young to understand. They talked quietly about family strategies, about how to balance honesty with age appropriateness, about the importance of maintaining their children's sense of agency while preparing them for roles that would place certain constraints on their choices. The conversation that had begun with Charlotte's bedtime questions was expanding into a broader family philosophy about how to raise children who could navigate the unique challenges of royal life while remaining grounded in the values that mattered most. I keep thinking about what she said about Uncle Harry, Catherine said as they settled into bed.
Her ability to hold compassion for him while still feeling sad about his absence. That's exactly the kind of emotional maturity that will serve her well in public life. She understood something that many adults struggle with, William reflected. That you can disagree with someone's choices while still respecting their right to make them.
That love doesn't require agreement. That families can be complicated and still be families.
Do you think we should tell Harry about this conversation? Catherine asked gently. About how thoughtfully she spoke about him. William considered this carefully.
Communication with Harry remained complicated, fraught with public pressures and private wounds that had not fully healed. But Charlotte's words had been so generous, so free of judgment, that perhaps they could serve as a bridge rather than another point of tension. Maybe someday, he said finally, when the time feels right. I think he would be touched to know that she thinks of him with such kindness. She really is remarkable, Catherine said, settling against William's shoulder. The questions she asked tonight, about fairness, about choice, about responsibility, about family, those are the questions that will define her generation of royals. And the way she approached them, with such thoughtfulness and empathy, gives me real hope for the future. She reminded me why this all matters, William said quietly.
Not the titles or the ceremonies or the protocol, but the fundamental purpose, using whatever advantages and platforms we have to serve others and work toward a more just world. She stripped away all the peripheral concerns and focused on what's essential.
The tool metaphor was brilliant, Catherine agreed. Thinking of royal privilege as a tool for service rather than an entitlement or burden, that's exactly the framework she'll need to navigate her role thoughtfully. As they drifted towards sleep, both William and Catherine felt a profound gratitude for the conversation they had shared with their daughter. What had begun as concern about Charlotte's growing awareness of royal challenges had evolved into confidence in her ability to meet those challenges with wisdom and grace. The questions that had initially seemed to come too early now felt perfectly timed, asked by a child who was ready to begin processing complex realities. answered by parents who had learned to balance honesty with hope. Charlotte's curiosity had created space for a family dialogue that would continue to evolve as she and her brothers grew older, but the foundation had been established. Their children would approach their royal roles with clear moral principles, realistic understanding of challenges, and unwavering commitment to service. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the breakfast room as the Cambridge family gathered for their usual Saturday morning meal. Outside, the September air carried the first hints of autumn, and the palace gardens showed touches of gold and amber among the green. It was the kind of peaceful domestic scene that visitors to Kensington Palace rarely witnessed. 3 children in various states of morning alertness, parents sharing quiet conversation over coffee and tea, the comfortable chaos of family life temporarily shielding them from the formal demands of royal duty.
Charlotte appeared at the breakfast table looking refreshed and thoughtful, her hair still bearing traces of sleep, but her eyes bright with the clarity that often followed important conversations. She kissed both parents good morning and settled into her usual chair between George and Louis, reaching immediately for the bowl of fresh berries that Catherine had prepared. "Did you sleep well, sweetheart?" William asked, studying his daughter's face for any signs that their extensive conversation had left her troubled or overwhelmed. "Very well," Charlotte replied, then paused thoughtfully.
"I had interesting dreams about helping people, but good dreams, not worried dreams."
Catherine exchanged a meaningful glance with William. Both of them relieved that Charlotte seemed to have processed their evening discussion in a positive way. They had spent part of the night wondering whether they had shared too much too soon, but Charlotte's peaceful demeanor suggested that understanding had brought her comfort rather than additional anxiety.
George, now 9 and increasingly aware of family dynamics, looked up from his scrambled eggs with curiosity.
What were you and Papa and Mummy talking about last night?
I could hear voices from Charlotte's room for a really long time. Charlotte considered how to answer her brother, demonstrating the same thoughtfulness that had characterized all her questions the evening before.
"I was asking about what it means to be royal and whether it's fair, and how to be good at helping people even when it's complicated." "Those are big questions," George observed, clearly intrigued. "What did you decide?" "I decided that being royal is like having a special tool for helping people, but you have to learn how to use it properly and you have to really care about helping, not just about having the tool," Charlotte explained, using the metaphor that had crystallized her understanding.
George nodded slowly, and William could see his son processing this framework and considering how it might apply to his own future role. As the heir's heir, George would face even more scrutiny and expectation than his siblings, but he was also developing the thoughtful approach to responsibility that would serve him well.
"What kind of tool?" Louis asked, his 5-year-old curiosity latching onto the concrete imagery. "Like a hammer? Or a screwdriver?" Charlotte smiled at her youngest brother's literal interpretation. "More like a voice that can reach really far and help people hear about important things. Or like having lots of friends who can help you organize ways to help other people." "That sounds useful," Louis decided, returning to his toast with the satisfied air of someone whose questions had been adequately answered. As the children continued their breakfast conversation, William found himself marveling at how naturally Charlotte had begun to share her insights with her siblings. The understanding she had reached about royal responsibility was becoming a family conversation, creating space for George and Louis to process their own emerging questions about their roles and identities. After breakfast, the family dispersed to their various Saturday activities. George had football practice, Louis had a playdate with a school friend, and Charlotte had requested time in the palace library to read more about people who use their advantages to help others. The specific phrasing of her request revealed how deeply she was processing the concepts they had discussed. William found Charlotte an hour later, curled up in one of the library's comfortable reading chairs, with a biography of Princess Diana open in her lap. She looked up as he approached her, expression serious but not troubled. "Papa, I've been reading about Granny Diana and how she helped people," Charlotte said, using the family's term for William's late mother. "She used her royal position to visit sick children and talk about landmines and hug people with AIDS when other people were afraid." Was that her way of using the tool? The question pierced William's heart with its innocence and insight. Charlotte was beginning to understand her grandmother's legacy, not as distant history, but as a model for how royal privilege could be transformed into genuine service. The fact that she was making this connection independently showed how deeply she was processing the relationship between position and purpose. Yes, that was exactly her way of using it, William confirmed, settling into the chair beside his daughter. Granny Diana understood that people paid attention to her because she was royal, so she used that attention to shine light on causes and people that might otherwise be ignored. Like when she hugged children with AIDS because she wanted people to know that you couldn't catch it from touching? Charlotte asked, referencing a story she had clearly just read. Exactly like that. She used her position to challenge misconceptions and show compassion to people who were facing difficult situations. Charlotte turned the page to a photograph of Diana visiting a homeless shelter, her face animated with interest. She didn't just visit once for pictures, she kept going back and learning about the problems and trying to find solutions. She did. She believed that real service meant more than just appearing at events. It meant taking time to understand issues deeply and using her influence to create lasting change.
Is that why you work on homelessness too? Because you learned from her that it's important to keep focusing on problems until they're really solved? William nodded, touched by his daughter's ability to connect past and present, to see the continuity of purpose that linked generations of royal service.
Granny Diana taught me that the most important thing we can do is use our position to amplify the voices of people who might not otherwise be heard. Charlotte studied the photograph thoughtfully. She looks really happy in this picture, even though she's in a place where people are struggling. Is that because helping people made her feel good?
I think so, William said carefully. I think she found her greatest joy in connecting with people and working to make their lives better.
That's what gave her life meaning. Do you think that's what will make my life feel meaningful too? Finding ways to help people and working on problems that matter. I think it might, William replied. But the specific ways you choose to help will be up to you.
You might focus on different issues than Granny Diana did, or find different approaches to service. The important thing is that you follow your heart and your convictions.
Charlotte nodded, then returned to her reading with the focused concentration that characterized her approach to learning. William watched her for a few minutes, marveling at how naturally she was developing her own understanding of royal purpose by studying the examples of those who had come before. Later that afternoon, as the family gathered in the sitting room for their traditional Saturday tea, Charlotte surprised everyone by announcing that she had something important to share. "I've been thinking all day about our conversation last night," she began, looking directly at her parents.
"And I've decided something important."
William and Catherine exchanged glances, both curious and slightly apprehensive about what conclusion their 7-year-old daughter had reached. "I've decided that I do want to be a working royal when I grow up," Charlotte continued, "but not because I have to, and not because it's expected, but because I think it might be the best way for me to use my advantages to help people, like Granny Diana did, and like you and Mummy do." The declaration was delivered with such quiet,